People have been throwing the word cult around a lot lately. What exactly is a cult, and how can cults develop from political movements? Let's go. For this video, I'm using the work of Dr. John Jelilich, who is an international cult expert. First thing you need to understand, like most things in life, is that cults exist on a spectrum. Over here is high control, and over here is low control. I grew up Pentecostal in a pretty tight-knit religious community. We were on the spectrum of cult-like behavior, cult-like characteristics, without being considered a full-blown cult. So just because it doesn't look like a traditional cult does not mean that it doesn't have cult-like characteristics, okay? The first and most important characteristic of a cult is a charismatic leader. And followers of this leader have excessive and unquestioning devotion to this leader. The leader is the only source of truth. In fact, that's supposed to be a brain. They might be discouraged or even punished for questioning or doubting because that erodes confidence in the leader's ability to tell people what is true. They often practice mind-altering practices like meditations or chanting. These are little speech bubbles. Okay, so they're going to be using some sort of ritualized practice that they participate in. The leader dictates to these people how they should think, how they should feel, how they should act, almost to the point that they become extensions of his identity. This is a really important one. These members, in order to stay in this tight-knit community, they have to have a very strong us versus them mentality. This is universal in every cult community. Anytime you see this strongly, you're probably dealing with some form of cult. Because the leader's authority is seen as absolute, they are never to be held accountable by any external institution. So the law, journalists, other public figures trying to hold them accountable for their actions always backfires because it reinforces that the world is against them and all these outsiders are just trying to take us down and suppress the truth. In order to keep people inside the group, the leader will use mechanisms of emotional, psychological, and financial control. So they will use shame and guilt and punish people in order to keep them from going outside and seeing other perspectives. Because once somebody peeks their head out here and they see that the world is not as the leader says it was, they have cognitive dissonance, which I can make a whole video on just that alone. Most cults are preoccupied with recruiting, bringing in new members, so they can continue to exist and they can continue to grow and spread their version of truth. Another universal with cults is a preoccupation with making money. And this almost invariably goes straight to the pockets of the leader and doesn't often benefit the people who follow. Cult members are expected to and encouraged to spend a lot of time and energy and resources on cult behaviors and cult community rituals and things like that. And that is because of a phenomenon called sunk cost, that if you put time and money and energy into things, you assume it's because they are important. And because they are important, you put time and energy and money. People also need to have sort of like constant injections of truth to keep them in this sort of altered state of thinking. So if you don't regularly interact with the cult, you're more likely to poke your head out and see the world from a different perspective, which the cult does not want people to do. In many cults, members are encouraged to live with other cult members, but that could just mean spending a lot of time with other cult members or specifically staying away from people outside the cult. So they will only interact often with people in their group because all those other people are seen as dangerous. Once indoctrination is complete, once somebody is fully on the inside of this community, they believe with all of their heart and soul that there is no life outside of it. There is only danger, there's only destruction. And often the cult leader will help promote that idea because it keeps people in here. Which means the last and most fundamental characteristic of every single cult community that you will ever see, the center of it is always fear. They have been taught to be afraid that any other perspective, poking your head out, seeing the world from a different perspective, interacting with people from a different perspective, will lead to really bad things. That's why most cults really focus in some way or another on trying to save the world from all of these bad things. And it doesn't matter if all of these bad things are real or just completely fabricated by the leader, because the point is not to change the world. The point is control. The point is keeping people in the in-group. So how can cults develop from political movements? People often assume that this centralized leader is a religious figure, but that could just as easily be a political figure. And these could just as easily be voters as they could religious followers. And truth could just as easily be a political truth, not just a religious truth. These same principles still apply. The whole structure still applies. I think political cults can be more dangerous because religious cults tend to stay within the realm of religion and they don't really get a lot of media attention. They tend to stay obscure, whereas political figures, they automatically get a national platform, news coverage, all kinds of stuff. They get all kinds of attention that religious cults might not get. If you think you or someone you love has been roped into a cult, I'm going to make another video about deprogramming from cults, so make sure to watch it. I grew up in a cult-like community, and I'm telling you that there's a lot of life and healing outside of it. Even though you've probably been taught to be extremely afraid, you don't need to be that scared. There's a lot of us who have recovered and deprogrammed and are very, very balanced and healthy now, finding different paths. There are a lot of resources out there to help people recover from cults in a healthy way. I would also offer you, to end this video, you or someone you love, if you leave that kind of community, you need to find a new healthy community to plug into. Don't just be by yourself, because that is when you are in a vulnerable place and you might fall into just another cult because that's what you're used to. But it's very important not to be isolated during this time.